Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab. Now let's begin. Dean William pulled into the driveway at 6:30, same as every weekday for the past 8 years. The suburban Connecticut house looked perfect in the autumn twilight. White picket fence, manicured lawn, the kind of place that belonged on a postcard. He'd bought it because Veronica said it was essential for Evan to grow up somewhere stable, somewhere respectable. Her father had helped with the down payment, a fact Herbert Parrish never let him forget. Inside, Evan sat at the kitchen table, pushing chicken nuggets around his plate. At 7 years old, he should have been chattering about school, superheroes, something. Instead, he barely looked up when Dean walked in. "Hey, champ." Dean ruffled his son's hair, noting how Evan tensed at the gesture. "How was your day?" "Fine." The word came out flat, rehearsed. Veronica emerged from the hallway. Phone pressed to her ear, perfectly manicured nails tapping against the case. She'd been a paralegal when they met, sharp and ambitious. Now she spent most days at the country club or shopping with her mother. "Dad, I need to go. Dean's home." She ended the call without waiting for a response. "Dinner's ready. I'm going to my book club." "Again? That's 3 times this week. It's an important selection. We're reading Tolstoy." She grabbed her purse, kissed the air near Evan's head. "Be good for Daddy." The door closed before Dean could ask which Tolstoy. He suspected she couldn't name one either. Dean worked as a documentary filmmaker, specializing in investigative pieces for streaming platforms. His last project, exposing a pharmaceutical company's manipulation of clinical trials, had won awards and made enemies. It meant irregular hours, intense research periods, but it paid well enough that Veronica didn't need to work. She'd quit the paralegal job 2 years ago, right after her father suggested it. He sat across from Evan, studying his son's withdrawn posture. "Want to shoot some hoops after dinner?" Evan shook his head, kept his eyes down. "Minecraft." Another shake. "Buddy, you could talk to me about anything. You know that, right?" Evan's fork clattered against the plate. "May I be excused?" Dean watched him retreat upstairs, that same mechanical politeness that had been growing for months. He'd attributed it to school stress, maybe social issues, but this felt different, deeper. Later that night, Dean found Evan in bed, covers pulled to his chin despite the warm September evening. He sat on the edge of the mattress, the way he had since Evan was a baby. "Dad," Evan's voice cracked. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." Do you love me?" The question hit like a punch. "Evan, of course I do. More than anything in this world. Why would you even?" "Grandpa says people only love you if you're good, if you follow rules. He says I'm not good enough." Dean's jaw tightened. Herbert Parrish had always been demanding, critical, but this crossed a line. "Your grandfather is wrong. I love you no matter what. Good grades, bad grades, mistakes, successes. None of that changes how I feel about you." Evan's eyes welled up. "Really? Really?" Dean reached out to pull him into a hug. Evan flinched. It was automatic, instinctive, a full-body recoil from his father's raised hand. Dean froze, watching his son's face cycle through fear, shame, and resignation. "Evan," his voice came out strangled. "I would never hurt you. Never. You know that, right?" "I know, Dad." Evan's whisper barely carried across the small room. "But Grandpa does." The world tilted. "Does what?" Instead of answering, Evan slowly lifted his shirt. Belt marks. Fresh ones. Angry red welts crisscrossing his small back in a pattern Dean recognized from his research on child abuse cases. Some were new, but others had begun to yellow and fade. Evidence of repeated, systematic beatings. Dean's hands shook as he pulled out his phone, photographing the evidence with clinical precision. Years of documentary work overriding the rage, threatening to consume him. Every angle, every mark. Evidence. Always evidence first. How long? He could barely form the words. "Mom drops me there every day after school." "While you're working?" Evan's voice was small, matter of fact, like he was describing the weather. "Grandpa says it's because I need discipline. But he's too soft on me. That mom knows what's best." Every day. Dean thought back. Veronica had suggested it 6 months ago. Evan could do homework at her parents' house, save money on after-school care, spend time with family. He'd agreed, grateful she was taking initiative with her son's care. He'd been played. If I cry, it's worse. If I tell, it'll be worse. Evan's composure cracked. He says he'll leave us if you know I'm bad. He says Mom will choose him over me. He says, "Stop." Dean pulled his son close, careful of the injuries. None of that is true. None of it. You're not bad. You're not the problem. He is. Evan cried, then really cried, the kind of release that spoke of months of held-in terror. Dean held him, mind racing through possibilities. Call the police, but Veronica would be implicated. She'd known. She'd been delivering their son to his abuser daily. Call a lawyer first. Document everything. Build a case so airtight that Herbert Parrish would never see daylight again. After Evan finally fell asleep, Dean descended to his home office and pulled up his contact list. Philip Perkins answered on the second ring. "Dean, it's almost midnight. I need a lawyer. Family law. The best you know. Tonight, if possible." Philip's tone shifted, professional mode engaging. "What happened?" "My father-in-law has been beating my son. My wife has been facilitating it. I have photographs. I need full custody, restraining order, and I need to bury them both so deep they never surface." Silence. Then, "I'll make calls. Don't confront anyone. Don't tip your hand." "How old are the injuries?" "Fresh. Hours old. And older ones, maybe a week." "Hospital. Now, get a medical examination on record. I'll text you an attorney's name. She's a shark, handles high-profile custody cases. Then we call CPS and the police in that order." "Dean, do not contact your wife or her father." "Not yet." But Dean was already dialing another number as Philip talked, his documentary instincts taking over. Roland Connor picked up with his usual gravelly greeting. "You still have access to that mobile production van? The one from the corruption piece?" "Yeah, it's in storage." "What?" "I need it at my father-in-law's house tomorrow. And I need you to film everything that happens." "Dean, what?" "I'm going to make Herbert Parrish famous." The emergency room physician, a tired woman named Dr. Morrison, documented 12 separate injuries in various stages of healing. Blunt force trauma consistent with a belt or similar object. Patterns suggested repeated abuse over several months. She was legally obligated to report, she explained, handing Dean copies of the medical report with sympathetic eyes. Dean sat in the hospital hallway at 3 in the morning, Evan asleep in the examination room, and opened his laptop. Years of investigative journalism had taught him one thing. Everyone left a trail. He started digging into Herbert Parrish's past. What he found in the first hour made his blood run cold. Herbert Parrish, retired family court judge, pillar of the community, generous donor to children's charities. 3 marriages. 2 deceased wives, 1 in a car accident, 1 from a fall down the stairs. Veronica's mother, Carol, was the 3rd. Large life insurance payouts. A sealed case from 20 years ago involving a neighbor's complaint of screaming from the Parrish residence. Nothing ever charged. Dean cross-referenced property records. Herbert owned a lake house in Vermont, purchased after his first wife's death. A hunting cabin in the Adirondacks. A condo in Florida. All places Veronica had mentioned wanting to visit someday. Places her father went alone. He pulled up his network of sources, journalists, investigators, people who owed him favors from past documentaries. Sent out feelers. Asked about Herbert Parrish, retired judge, Greenwich, Connecticut area. Anything unusual, anything sealed, anything whispered. The responses started coming in before dawn. By the time Andrea Lansing, the attorney Philip had recommended, arrived at 7 a.m., Dean had compiled a file that went far beyond simple child abuse. He handed it to her in the hospital conference room, watched her expression shift from professional concern to genuine shock. "Mr. William, where did you get this?" "I'm an investigative journalist. It's what I do." She flipped through pages detailing financial irregularities in Herbert's court cases, suggesting bias in custody decisions favoring mothers. Mothers who later made substantial donations to Herbert's preferred charities. A pattern of sealed complaints from former court employees. 3 separate mentions of concerning behavior in judicial review notes buried in archive files. We can't use most of this in a custody case. Chain of evidence, privacy laws. I'm not giving it to you for the custody case. Dean's smile was cold. I'm making a documentary. My father-in-law spent 30 years as a family court judge, destroying families while presenting himself as their savior. I'm going to show the world who Herbert Parrish really is. That's a separate matter from protecting your son. Everything's connected. I want full custody. I want a restraining order. I want Veronica's parental rights investigated. And while the legal system does its job, I'm going to do mine. I'm going to make sure Herbert Parrish's name becomes synonymous with everything he claimed to stand against. Andrea studied him. You understand this will get ugly. Your wife will fight. Her father has connections, money, influence. So do I. And I have something he doesn't. What's that? The truth. And the ability to show it to millions of people. His phone buzzed. Roland, van's ready. Say the word. Dean typed back, tomorrow. His house. Sunrise. I want cameras rolling when I knock on his door. Then he called the number he'd been saving, the one he'd sworn he'd never use unless absolutely necessary. When Herbert Parrish answered, sleep fuzzy and irritated, Dean spoke with perfect calm. I'm coming over. Herbert's laugh was condescending, dismissive, everything Dean expected. For what? Veronica's not here. She stayed at our place last night. I know. I need to talk to you. Man to man. It's 7 in the morning on a Saturday. Check your driveway. Silence. Dean could hear movement, footsteps, the sound of blinds being opened. When Herbert spoke again, his voice had changed completely. The arrogant judge replaced by something uncertain, almost afraid. What is this? What are you doing? In the Parrish driveway sat Roland's mobile production van, satellite dish extended, professional camera, equipment visible through the windows. Dean had parked his car blocking the garage. On the lawn, he placed a sign, simple and clear. Documentary in progress. Herbert Parrish. Family court judge, child abuser. I'm coming over, Dean repeated, and we're going to have a very public conversation about what you've been doing to my son. You can cooperate, or you can make this difficult. Either way, the cameras are rolling. You can't. This is harassment. I'll call the police. Please do. I've already called Child Protective Services. They'll be there in about 30 minutes. The police will be there in 20. And my lawyer is filing for an emergency custody hearing Monday morning. But first, you and I are going to talk. On camera. About everything. Herbert's breathing was ragged. Veronica won't let you take Evan. Veronica delivered our son to you knowing you were beating him. She's complicit. And when I'm done, everyone will know exactly what kind of family the Parrishes really are. Dean ended the call and looked at Andrea. Now we go to his house. Now it begins. The Parrish estate sprawled across 2 acres of prime Connecticut real estate, a Georgian colonial that screamed old money and older secrets. Dean pulled up behind the production van at 7:30, medical reports in hand. Evan safely with Philip's wife at an undisclosed location. Roland met him at the door. Cameras are live, streaming to secure cloud storage. Whatever happens, we have it recorded. Good, because Herbert Parrish is about to have the worst day of his life. The front door opened before Dean could knock. Herbert stood there, still in his robe, face mottled with rage. At 72, he maintained the imposing bearing of a man used to controlling courtrooms, used to being obeyed. But his eyes darted to the cameras, calculating. You're trespassing. I'm documenting a crime. There's a difference. Dean held up the medical report. 12 injuries. Multiple stages of healing. Pattern consistent with systematic abuse. Your grandson's injuries, Herbert. Want to explain that to the cameras? Get off my property before you what? Beat me like you beat Evan? Please. Try it. Give me more footage. Carol appeared behind her husband, face pale. Dean, what's happening? What is all this? Dean turned to her, something like pity in his expression. Your husband has been abusing Evan, beating him with a belt, for months. And Veronica knew. She was dropping him off here every day, knowing what would happen. Carol's hand went to her mouth. The shock looked genuine, but Dean had learned not to trust anything in this family. Herbert, tell me this isn't true. It's discipline, Herbert snapped. The boy is soft, undisciplined. His father fills his head with liberal nonsense. Someone had to teach him respect, teach him to be a man. Dean felt Roland stiffen beside him. The cameras were catching every word. You call beating a 7-year-old discipline? Dean's voice was deadly quiet. You call leaving welts and bruises on a child's back teaching respect? I call it necessary correction that you were too weak to provide. Veronica understood. She knew her son needed a firm hand. Where is she? Inside. Asleep. She came here last night to get away from you and your accusations. Then let's wake her up. Let's all have this conversation together. Herbert's hand shot out, gripping Dean's shoulder. It was a mistake. Dean had been waiting for contact, for Herbert to make the first physical move. He grabbed the older man's wrist, twisted just enough to make him release the grip, and stepped back. Don't touch me. You've put your hands on someone in my family for the last time. Police sirens echoed in the distance, growing closer. Herbert's face went from red to pale. You actually called them. I told you I would. CPS is right behind them. And then my lawyer is filing for an emergency custody order. But that's just the legal side, Herbert. The real show starts next week when my documentary airs. The judge who destroyed families. I think that's what I'll call it. I've been digging into your career. All those cases where you favored mothers who later donated to your charities. All those SEAL complaints. Your first 2 wives and their convenient deaths. It's all going to come out. You can't prove anything. I'm not in a courtroom, Herbert. I don't need to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. I just need to show enough to make people question, to make them wonder, to make sure that when they hear the name Herbert Parrish, they think child abuser instead of respected judge. 2 patrol cars pulled up, followed by an unmarked sedan, CPS. Dean watched Herbert's world crumble in real time, the realization that he couldn't judge his way out of this, couldn't intimidate or control the situation. Veronica stumbled out, hair disheveled, and stopped dead when she saw the scene. Dean, what are you doing here? Protecting our son. Something you stopped doing months ago. I don't know what he told you, but he didn't have to tell me anything. I saw the belt marks, Veronica. I took him to the hospital. We have medical documentation. And now I have your father on camera admitting to necessary correction of a 7-year-old child. Her face cycled through expressions, shock, fear, calculation. She chose wrong. Dad was just trying to help. Evan needed structure, discipline. You're always working, always gone. Someone had to step up. By beating him, by allowing your father to beat him. It wasn't beating. It was... There's no good way to finish that sentence, Veronica. 12 injuries. Documented by a physician. Reported to authorities. And now, captured on camera for millions of people to see. The lead police officer, a veteran named Martinez, approached with his notepad out. Someone want to tell me what's going on? Dean handed him the medical report. My son has been systematically abused by Herbert Parrish. My wife has been facilitating it by bringing him here daily. I have photographic evidence, medical documentation, and I just recorded Mr. Parrish admitting to physically disciplining my son. Martinez read the report, his expression darkening. He looked at Herbert. Mr. Parrish, we need to talk. Inside. I'm a retired judge. I know my rights. I'm not saying anything without my lawyer. That's fine, sir. But we still need to talk. As Martinez led Herbert inside, another officer stayed with Veronica. The CPS worker, a sharp-eyed woman named Kim Santos, approached Dean. Mr. William, I'm going to need to speak with your son. He's in a safe location. My lawyer has the address. We can arrange a meeting today, but I want it on neutral ground, not here. She nodded. That's acceptable. We'll also need to interview Mrs. William and Mr. Parrish separately. Dean watched Veronica's face as reality set in. She was going to be investigated. Her parental rights were in question. The perfect life she'd built on her father's money and influence was collapsing. Roland leaned in, voice low. We got everything. His admission, Veronica's justification, all of it. Good. Send copies to Andrea, to CPS, and keep the originals in 3 separate secure locations. This is just the beginning. By noon, Herbert Parrish had been arrested for felony child abuse. Veronica had been questioned for 3 hours about her knowledge and complicity. Emergency custody had been granted to Dean pending a full hearing. And Dean sat in his lawyer's office, watching Roland edit the first cut of what would become his most important documentary. This is powerful stuff, Andrea said quietly. But you know what's coming. They'll attack you. They'll say you manipulated the situation, that you're exploiting your son for views, that you're bitter about the marriage. Let them. I have evidence. I have the truth. And I have a platform to show it to the world. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You've made a serious mistake. My father has friends in every courthouse in the state. You'll never work again. You'll never see Evan again. Back down now, and maybe we can make this go away. Veronica, still fighting, still believing her father's power would protect them. Dean showed the text to Andrea. Can we use this? Absolutely. It's witness intimidation. Save everything she sends. Another text. I'm sorry about Evan. But Dad was right that you're not strong enough to raise him properly. He needs discipline, structure, things you can't provide. Dean replied with just 4 words. See you in court. Then he turned to Roland. How fast can we finish this documentary? With what we have now, a week. But if you want to really bury them, we need more. We need the other victims. Then let's find them. Herbert Parrish spent 30 years on the bench. 30 years of families passing through his courtroom. Some of them must have stories. Some of them must have seen who he really was. Andrea cleared her throat. Before you go full investigative journalist, remember you're also a father in a custody battle. CPS is watching everything you do. Don't give them ammunition. I'm not doing anything illegal. I'm researching a documentary about judicial corruption and child abuse. The fact that it involves my father-in-law is just unfortunate coincidence. She smiled grimly. I'll make sure to phrase it exactly that way in court. As Dean left the office, his phone rang. Herbert's lawyer, a silk-suited shark named Douglas Winters. Mr. William, I represent Herbert Parrish. My client wishes to discuss a resolution to this unfortunate misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding. Your client beat my son. The evidence is clear. Evidence that could be interpreted various ways. Evan is a rambunctious child. Injuries could have come from normal play, sports activities. My client simply provided childcare at your wife's request. The medical examiner says the injuries are consistent with systematic abuse using a belt or similar object. Medical examiners can be wrong. And your wife is prepared to testify that you've been unstable lately, obsessed with your work, neglectful of your family. She's concerned about Evan's safety in your care. Dean laughed, cold and humorless. Is this the best you have? Because I have medical records, photographs, video of your client admitting to disciplining Evan, and text messages from my wife confirming her knowledge and complicity. What do you have? I have a retired judge with an unblemished record and significant credibility. I have a concerned mother worried about her child. And I have connections in family court that will make your life very difficult. Then I guess we'll see each other in court, and in the media, and in the court of public opinion. I look forward to it, Mr. Winters. He ended the call and looked at Roland, who'd filmed the entire conversation from across the street. They're going to fight dirty. So will we. Dirtier. That evening, Dean sat with Evan in a hotel room. Andrea had advised against returning to the house until the custody situation was resolved. His son was quiet, picking at the pizza Dean had ordered. Am I in trouble? Evan finally asked. No, buddy. You're not in trouble. You didn't do anything wrong. But Grandpa went to jail because of me. Grandpa went to jail because of what he did to you. That's on him, not you. Is Mom mad at me? Dean chose his words carefully. Mom made some bad choices. She's dealing with the consequences. But none of this is your fault. You're just a kid. Adults are supposed to protect you, not hurt you. Will I have to see Grandpa again? Not if I have anything to say about it. And I'm doing everything I can to make sure you never have to be afraid again. Evan crawled into his lap, something he hadn't done in months. I'm glad I told you, Dad. Me too, champ. Me too. As Evan fell asleep that night, Dean pulled up his laptop and continued his research. Herbert Parrish's past was a minefield of buried secrets, and Dean was going to excavate every single one. The documentary would be just the beginning. Monday morning brought the emergency custody hearing. Dean sat next to Andrea in the courthouse, not one of Herbert's old haunts, but a neutral venue in Hartford. Across the aisle, Veronica and Douglas Winters whispered urgently. Judge Marilyn Foster presided, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s with a reputation for protecting children above all else. Dean had researched her extensively. She'd overturned several of Herbert's decisions over the years, calling his reasoning troubling in her written opinions. Andrea presented the medical evidence, the photographs, the police report. Douglas tried to argue that the injuries were inconclusive, that Evan was prone to accidents, that Dean was fabricating a narrative to win custody in a deteriorating marriage. Then Andrea played the video. Herbert Parrish, on camera, admitting to necessary correction and firm discipline, explaining that Evan needed to be taught to be a man. The courtroom went silent as his words echoed. Judge Foster's expression hardened. "Mr. Winters, does your client dispute the authenticity of this video?" "Your Honor, the video was obtained without Mr. Parrish's consent on his private property." "That's not what I asked. Is it authentic?" Winters hesitated. "My client was ambushed under duress." "I'll take that as a yes." "Mrs. William, you were present during this recording?" Veronica stood, hands shaking. "Yes, Your Honor." "And you heard your father describe physically disciplining your son?" "It wasn't abuse. It was discipline. My father was helping to raise Evan properly, by beating him with a belt, by providing structure that his father doesn't." "Mrs. William, did you know your son had injuries consistent with belt marks?" Silence. "Mrs. William, answer the question." I may have seen some marks. But Evan is clumsy. He falls a lot." Andrea stood. "Your Honor, may I present text messages between Mrs. William and her mother, dated 2 months ago?" The messages appeared on the courtroom screen. Veronica to Carol. "Dad went too hard on Evan today. The marks will show." Carol's response. "Keep him in long sleeves until they fade. Don't tell Dean." Judge Foster's jaw tightened. "Mrs. William, you're telling me you didn't know about the abuse, but here's evidence you were actively concealing it from your husband?" Veronica's lawyer whispered frantically in her ear. She shook her head. "I want to change my testimony. I want immunity." The courtroom erupted. Dean watched as Veronica made her play, the one he'd anticipated, throw Herbert under the bus to save herself. "Your Honor," Veronica continued, voice breaking, "my father has controlled me my entire life. I was afraid of him. When he said he needed to discipline Evan, I didn't know how to say no. I'm the victim here, too." Andrea objected immediately. "Your Honor, Mrs. William is attempting to rewrite history. She actively participated in delivering her son to his abuser and conceal the evidence. She even texted her husband threats about never seeing Evan again just 2 days ago." Judge Foster held up her hand. "I'll hear from the child." "Mr. William, where is Evan?" "In a safe location with my friend's family, Your Honor. I didn't want to subject him to this environment." "Understandable, but I need to speak with him. We'll recess until this afternoon. I want Evan here at 2 p.m., and I'll interview him in chambers." Evan sat in Judge Foster's chambers, small and scared, but braver than Dean had ever seen him. The judge spoke gently, asking about his days at Grandpa's house, about how he got his injuries, about whether he felt safe with his mother. Dean watched through the one-way glass, Andrea beside him. Evan told the truth, all of it. How Grandpa said he was bad, how Mom told him not to cry, how he'd learned to hide the bruises. How he loved his dad, but was scared to tell him because Grandpa said Dad would leave. When they returned to the courtroom, Judge Foster's decision was swift. Temporary full custody to Mr. Dean William. Mrs. Veronica William will have supervised visitation only, pending psychological evaluation and completion of parenting classes. All contact between the child and Herbert Parrish is suspended indefinitely pending criminal trial. This court finds substantial evidence of abuse and neglect. Veronica's face crumpled. Douglas Winters immediately filed an appeal, but Dean knew it would go nowhere. The evidence was too strong, the video too damning. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Dean had tipped off a few trusted colleagues, knowing the story would break anyway. Better to control the narrative. "Mr. William, is it true your father-in-law is a retired judge?" "Yes. Herbert Parrish served as a family court judge for 30 years. "And you're making a documentary about this case?" "I'm making a documentary about judicial corruption and child abuse in the family court system." My son's case is part of a larger pattern I've uncovered. What pattern? Dean smiled. Watch the documentary. It releases next month. The next 3 weeks were a blur of investigation, interviews, and evidence gathering. Dean's documentary team worked around the clock, tracking down families who'd passed through Herbert's courtroom. They found 23 willing to talk. The stories were horrifying. Custody stripped from fit fathers and given to abusive mothers who later donated to Herbert's charities. Cases sealed without explanation. Children who disappeared into foster care despite family members begging to take them. And always, Herbert Parrish presiding, righteous and untouchable. One interview stood out. A woman named Sarah Mitchell, whose ex-husband had beaten her and their daughter. She'd fled to a shelter, gotten a protective order, built a case. Herbert Parrish had granted the husband full custody, calling Sarah hysterical and unfit. 3 months later, the daughter was hospitalized with a broken arm. 6 months after that, the husband was arrested for domestic violence. He destroyed my life, Sarah said, tears streaming. I lost my daughter for 2 years because Herbert Parrish decided I wasn't credible. And I found out later my ex-husband had made a substantial donation to Parrish's favorite charity. Dean documented everything. Bank records showing donations from parties who'd won favorable rulings. Sealed court files obtained through FOIA requests and investigative loopholes. Pattern after pattern of corruption masked as judicial discretion. Meanwhile, Herbert's criminal case proceeded. The prosecution was building a solid case. The medical evidence, Dean's video, Carol's reluctant testimony that she'd heard Herbert hitting Evan. Douglas Winters tried every trick, but the evidence was overwhelming. Veronica attempted to play victim, claiming she'd been controlled and manipulated by her father. But Dean's lawyer produced evidence of her active participation. Not just the text messages, but bank records showing she'd received monthly payments from Herbert's accounts, payments that increased after Evan started going there for after-school care. She was being paid to deliver him, Andrea explained to Dean. $500 a month, deposited like clockwork. She wasn't a victim. She was complicit. Dean felt sick. His wife had sold their son's safety for money, for her father's approval, for reasons he might never fully understand. The divorce papers were filed within days. 4 weeks after that terrible night, when Evan lifted his shirt, Dean sat in a screening room with his production team. The documentary was finished. 90 minutes of devastating testimony, damning evidence, and Herbert Parrish's own words condemning him. The judge who destroyed families would premiere on one of the major streaming platforms in 3 days. Advanced reviews were already calling it explosive, necessary viewing, an indictment of the family court system. But first, Dean had one more move to make. He called Herbert's lawyer. I want to meet with your client. Absolutely not. Mr. Parrish has been advised not to speak with you. Even if I'm offering a deal. Silence. What kind of deal? A private screening of my documentary. Just him, me, and the truth. If he watches it and still wants to fight, fine. But I think he should see what's coming. Why would you do that? Because I want him to know exactly what he's lost, what he threw away. And I want to see his face when he realizes there's no way out. The meeting was arranged in a conference room at Douglas Winters' law office. Herbert sat across from Dean, aged a decade and a month. House arrest, an impending trial had stripped away his judicial bearing, leaving only a bitter old man. Dean started the documentary. Herbert watched his career disintegrate on screen. Interview after interview, family after family, all testifying to his corruption, his cruelty, his abuse of power. The financial evidence, the sealed cases, the pattern of favoring donors over children's welfare. And then, near the end, Evan's testimony. Judge Foster had allowed Dean to use the audio from the Chambers interview. Evan's small voice describing the beatings, the fear, the pain. Describing how his own mother had told him to lie, to hide, to protect Grandpa because he was just trying to help. Herbert's hands shook. This will ruin me. You ruined yourself. I'm just showing people who you really are. My reputation is built on the suffering of children and families you destroyed for profit. That reputation deserves to die. I gave Veronica everything. I built this family. You built an empire of abuse and corruption. And now it's over. Herbert looked at Dean with something almost like pleading. What do you want? Money? I'll pay you to not release this. I don't want your money. I want you to plead guilty. I want you to allocate in open court to what you did to Evan, to all those families. I want you to admit everything. Never. I won't destroy myself for you. Dean stood, gathering his laptop. Then enjoy the premiere. 3 million subscribers will be watching. By the end of the week, everyone will know the name Herbert Parrish, and they'll know exactly what it means. As he reached the door, Herbert's voice stopped him. You've destroyed your marriage. Veronica will never forgive you. Veronica chose to protect you instead of her own son. The marriage was already destroyed. I'm just making sure Evan never has to be afraid again. He'll resent you for this, for exposing the family like this. Dean turned back. Maybe, but he'll be alive and safe to resent me. That's more than you would have given him. The documentary dropped on a Friday morning. By noon, it was trending #1. By evening, the Attorney General had announced an investigation into Herbert Parrish's entire judicial career. By the next morning, 3 more families had come forward with complaints. Dean watched the response from his laptop while Evan played video games beside him. His son was slowly returning to normal, laughing, joking, being a kid. Therapy helped. Distance from the Parrish family helped more. Veronica had asked for a meeting. Dean agreed, with Andrea present and everything recorded. She looked smaller somehow, her perfect veneer cracked beyond repair. I want to explain. There's nothing to explain. You knew. You participated. You chose your father over our son. I was scared. You don't understand what it was like growing up with him. Then you should have protected Evan even more fiercely. Instead, you fed him to the same monster. I want another chance. With Evan. With you. Dean almost laughed. We're getting divorced. You'll be lucky if you get supervised visitation after the investigation concludes. And me? I'm done. I spent 8 years building a life with you, and you spent the last 6 months torturing our son. I loved you. No, you love what I provided. Stability, success, a chance to escape your father while still keeping his approval. You love having your cake and eating it too. But love? Real love protects. Real love sacrifices. Real love doesn't trade a child's safety for money and approval. Veronica left in tears. Dean felt nothing. Herbert Parrish's trial began 3 months later. The evidence was overwhelming. Medical reports, video footage, testimony from Carol, who'd filed for divorce and turned state's evidence, and Evan's own words. The prosecution built a methodical case. But it was the testimony of Sarah Mitchell and the other families from the documentary that truly buried him. One by one, they described how Herbert had destroyed their lives, separated them from their children, ruled from the bench with cruelty and corruption. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts of child abuse. Guilty on felony assault. Guilty on corruption charges stemming from the documentary's revelations. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Judge Foster, specially appointed to preside over the case, looked down at Herbert Parrish with cold disdain. Mr. Parrish, you spent 30 years in a position of sacred trust. Families came before you at their most vulnerable, seeking justice and protection for their children. Instead, you abused that trust. You took bribes disguised as donations. You separated children from fit parents. And you inflicted physical and psychological torture on your own grandson. This court sentences you to 15 years in state prison on the abuse charges to run consecutively with 10 years for corruption. You will also pay restitution to the 23 families identified in the investigation, totaling $800,000. Your judicial pension is forfeit. You are permanently barred from any position of authority over children. Herbert stood silent, broken. The man who'd once commanded courtrooms with absolute power was led away in handcuffs. Dean watched from the gallery, Evan beside him. His son squeezed his hand. Is it over, Dad? Yeah, champ. It's over. Veronica's case was separate. The prosecution offered a deal, testimony against Herbert in exchange for suspended sentence and probation. She took it, admitting on the stand that she'd knowingly delivered Evan to be abused, that she'd concealed the injuries, that she'd accepted payment from her father. Her testimony sealed Herbert's fate, but destroyed any remaining sympathy for her. The court granted Dean full custody. Veronica was allowed supervised visitation once a month, contingent on completing therapy and parenting classes. She never showed up to the first visitation, or the second. By the third missed appointment, Evan stopped asking about her. "Is Mom ever coming back?" he asked one night. "I don't know, buddy, but you have me, and you have people who love you. That's what matters." Carol Parrish reached out through lawyers, wanting to establish a relationship with Evan. Dean was cautious, but Andrea advised allowing supervised visits. Carol had cooperated fully with prosecutors, had divorced Herbert, had entered therapy herself. The first visit was awkward. Carol brought cookies and apologies, unable to meet Evan's eyes. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I should have protected you. I should have stopped him." Evan, with the resilience of children, just shrugged. "It's okay, Grandma. You were scared too." Dean watched carefully, but Carol seemed genuine. Over time, monthly visits became regular. She was trying to rebuild, to atone. It wasn't redemption, but it was something. The judge who destroyed families won 3 Emmy Awards and sparked a nationwide conversation about judicial accountability. Dean received offers for book deals, speaking engagements, consulting on family court reform legislation. But the most important outcome was simpler. Evan started smiling again. 1 year after that terrible night, Dean sat at Evan's baseball game, watching his son pitch with confidence he'd never shown before. Roland sat beside him, camera ready to capture the moment. "You know the kid's going to see the documentary someday," Roland said. "I know. And when he does, I'll tell him the truth, that I did what I had to do to protect him. That sometimes the right thing isn't the easy thing. He'll understand. You're a good father, Dean." "I'm trying to be." Evan struck out the last batter and ran off the field, grin splitting his face. He crashed into Dean's arms, sweaty and happy and whole. "Did you see that, Dad? Did you see?" "I saw, champ. You were amazing. Can we get ice cream?" "Absolutely." As they walked to the car, Evan chattered about the game, about school, about the science project he was excited about. Normal kid things. Beautiful, mundane, normal things. Dean's phone buzzed. An email from the Attorney General's office. 17 more cases under review from Herbert's tenure. The investigation was expanding. More families getting justice. He deleted it without reading the details. That was someone else's fight now. His job was simpler. Be there for his son. Protect him. Love him. Show him that families could be built on truth instead of control, on love instead of fear. Herbert Parrish died in prison 3 years into his sentence. Heart attack, the report said. Dean felt nothing when he heard. No satisfaction, no grief. Just a distant acknowledgement that a chapter had truly closed. Veronica sent a card on Evan's 10th birthday. Dean gave it to him, letting him decide whether to open it. Evan looked at it for a long moment, then tossed it in the trash. "I'm good, Dad. I have everything I need." And he did. They both did. Years later, when Evan was applying to colleges, he wrote his admissions essay about resilience, about his father's courage, about learning that sometimes the right thing means standing alone against everyone you thought you could trust. He got accepted to every school he applied to. Dean read the essay in his son's dorm room, helping him move in, and felt tears he didn't bother to hide. "You did good, champ." Evan hugged him. "I had a good teacher." The documentary still played, still sparked conversations, still helped families recognize abuse and find their own courage to speak up. Herbert Parrish's name lived on, but not as the respected judge he'd wanted to be remembered as. He was a cautionary tale, a warning, a symbol of everything the system should protect against. And in a suburban house in Connecticut, a father and son built a new life from the ashes of the old one. Built it on truth, on love, on the simple radical act of protecting the vulnerable instead of hiding behind power. Dean William had made many documentaries in his career, exposing corruption and injustice. But his greatest achievement wasn't on screen. It was the healthy, happy, thriving young man who called him Dad. That was the real victory. That was the story that mattered most. And every time Evan smiled without fear, every time he raised his voice without hesitation, every time he stood up for himself with confidence, That was Dean's revenge on Herbert Parrish. The old judge had tried to break a child's spirit. Instead, he'd forged it into something stronger than he could ever destroy. That was justice. That was triumph. That was enough. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Chapter 1. Ghost Roads. Marvin Donnelly's hands gripped the steering wheel of his beat-up Toyota Camry at 11:47 p.m., the same way they'd gripped 100 steering wheels over the past 2 years. The rideshare app glowed green on the dashboard mount, its cheerful ping system a metronome for his new life. One he never asked for. One that started the night his world collapsed at the intersection of Maple and 14th. The house on Elderberry Street was dark when he'd left 3 hours ago. Diane was probably asleep or pretending to be. They'd become experts at that, the art of pretending. Pretending they were fine. Pretending the empty bedroom at the end of the hall wasn't a black hole pulling their marriage into oblivion. Pretending they could survive $200,000 in medical bills from those 17 desperate days when Jake fought to stay alive. Jake, 13 years old, skateboard under one arm, backpack slung over his shoulder, crossing at the light like they taught him 1,000 times. Gone. Marvin blinked hard, forcing himself back to the present. Route 9 stretched ahead, rain-slicked and nearly empty. His phone pinged, a pickup request from O'Malley's bar downtown. He accepted it automatically. Friday night drunks were his bread and butter now, tipping well in their guilt-addled hazes. Before the accident, Marvin had been a mechanical engineer at Trenton Aerospace. Good salary, benefits, a pension plan. He designed components for commercial aircraft, worked on projects he couldn't talk about at dinner parties. Then came the medical bills, the time off, the grief that made focusing impossible. The company was understanding, right up until they laid him off 9 months later. Budget cuts, they said. His position was eliminated. The life insurance money was supposed to be for Jake's college fund. Instead, it went to paying off the hospital, the ambulance, the specialist who couldn't save him. What was left barely covered 6 months of mortgage payments. Diane worked double shifts at Riverside Hospital, nursing patients while falling apart inside. They'd stopped talking about Jake, except in practical terms. His belongings, the memorial fund at his school, whether to keep his room intact or finally pack it away. They certainly never talked about the driver who destroyed their lives and vanished into the night. The police investigation had stalled within weeks. No witnesses with clear vehicle descriptions. No traffic cameras at that particular intersection. Budget cuts again, the city's favorite excuse. A dark sedan, maybe blue, maybe black. Could have been a Honda, a Toyota, a Nissan. The detective assigned to their case, a weary man named Oscar Kellogg, had been sympathetic but honest. Without witnesses or forensic evidence, the case was nearly impossible to solve. These things sometimes break open years later, Kellogg had said, his weathered face apologetic. Someone talks, someone's conscience gets the better of them. I've seen it happen. 2 years later, Marvin was still waiting. He pulled up to O'Malley's, the neon shamrock in the window, flickering arrhythmically. A man stumbled out, mid-30s, expensive leather jacket, designer jeans. Even drunk, the guy looked like he'd never missed a meal or worried about a bill. "You my Uber," the man slurred, squinting at the Camry. "If you're heading to Riverside Estates," Marvin confirmed, checking the app. The man, Brandon, according to the app, collapsed into the back seat with the graceless thud of someone who'd long since passed the pleasant stage of intoxication. He reeked of whiskey and cologne that probably cost more than Marvin's weekly grocery budget. "Worst fucking night, man," Brandon announced to no one in particular as Marvin pulled into traffic. "You ever have a night that just won't end? Like the universe is punishing you for something." Marvin's jaw tightened. He'd had an entire 2 years like that, but he said nothing. He learned early in his Uber driving career that some passengers needed to talk, needed a stranger to confess to. He was a priest in a rolling confessional, paid by the mile to absolve sins he didn't care about. My girlfriend, Brandon continued, his words mushy at the edges. Caught me. Finally caught me. I've been so careful, man. So fucking careful for 3 years. And tonight she goes through my phone, finds the messages with Crystal. Marvin navigated a turn, his face neutral. Just another drunk with another cliché problem. 3 years ago, I had the worst night of my life, Brandon said, his voice dropping into something that might have been genuine emotion under all the alcohol. I mean, before tonight. Before Stephanie threw my ass out. He laughed, a bitter sound. I did something, man. Something I can never take back. Marvin's hands tightened imperceptibly on the wheel. I hit some kid, Brandon said quietly. The world narrowed to a pinpoint. Marvin's heart hammered against his ribs, but his face remained calm, his voice steady. What do you mean? 3 years ago, I was coming from this party, had too many, way too many. I knew I shouldn't drive, but I did anyway. Stupid, so fucking stupid. Brandon's head lolled back against the seat. I was on my phone, arguing with my girlfriend at the time. Always a girlfriend, right? Always some girl. And then this kid on a skateboard just appeared in front of me. Marvin could barely breathe. Where? Some intersection downtown. Maple and something. 14th? Yeah, Maple and 14th. Brandon's voice was distant, lost in memory. I didn't see him until it was too late. Heard the thump, felt the car hit something. I panicked, man. I kept driving. Switched the car with my brothers the next day, got the damage fixed at this body shop in Elkton, paid cash. Told everyone I hit a deer upstate. The interior of the car felt airless, reality bending around Marvin like heat waves off asphalt. His son, this drunk, careless piece of human garbage, had killed his son and driven away. The news said he died. Brandon continued, oblivious. 13-year-old kid. I followed the story for weeks, terrified they'd trace it back to me. But they never did. No cameras, no witnesses. I got away with it. He laughed again, darker now. And you know what the fucked up part is? I probably would have forgotten about it eventually if Stephanie hadn't just blown up my whole life tonight. Now I'm thinking about it again. That kid, his parents. I killed someone's son and just went on with my life. Marvin pulled onto Brandon Street, Riverside Estates, where houses started at $800,000 and people like Brandon Hinton lived insulated lives of consequence-free existence. What's your name? Marvin asked, his voice steady despite the rage building like a tsunami behind his teeth. Brandon Hinton. What? Marvin pulled into the driveway of a modern colonial, all glass and angles. He turned slightly, getting a good look at Brandon's face in the streetlight. Late 30s, soft around the edges despite the expensive gym membership his credit card probably paid for automatically. Brown hair, weak chin, the kind of face that had learned early it could charm its way out of trouble. This is you, Marvin said. Brandon fumbled with his seatbelt, his phone, his wallet. He pulled out a crumpled 20 and tossed it toward the front seat. Keep the change, man. Thanks for listening. You're like therapist, Uber driver, or something. He laughed at his own joke, stumbling out of the car. Marvin watched him weave up the walkway, unlock his front door, disappear inside. He sat there for 5 full minutes, engine idling, staring at the house where his son's killer lived. Then he drove home, his mind no longer fuzzy with grief and despair, but crystalline clear with purpose. For the first time in 2 years, Marvin Donnelly had something to live for. Revenge. Chapter 2. The Unraveling. The kitchen light was on when Marvin got home at 2 a.m. Diane sat at the table, still in her scrubs from the hospital, a cup of cold tea in front of her. She'd been crying. He could see the puffiness around her eyes, even from across the room. I went to his room today, she said without preamble. I finally went inside. Marvin closed the door softly behind him. Jake's room had been sealed like a tomb for 2 years. Everything exactly as he'd left it the morning he died. Skateboard magazine on the nightstand. Math homework half finished on his desk. Shoes kicked off by the bed. I thought maybe it was time, Diane continued, her voice hollow, to pack some things, to donate his clothes to families who need them. Jake would have wanted that, right? He was always so kind. She broke on the last word, and Marvin moved to her, pulling her against him. She was all bones and exhaustion, working herself to death to pay bills and avoid memories. "I can't do this anymore, Marvin," she whispered against his chest. "I can't live in this house. I can't keep pretending we're going to be okay. We're drowning, and no one's coming to save us." 3 months behind on the mortgage. Credit cards maxed out. The bank had sent another threatening letter yesterday about foreclosure proceedings. They were losing everything piece by piece, while the man who'd started it all lived in his glass house on Riverside Estates. "What if I told you," Marvin said carefully, "that I found him?" Diane pulled back, her eyes searching his face. "Found who?" "The driver. The man who killed Jake." The transformation was instant. Color flooded back in her cheeks. Her eyes, dead for so long, suddenly sparked with something. Hope, rage, a desperate hunger for justice. "What? How?" Marvin told her everything. The drunk passenger, the confession, the address. As he talked, Diane's hands clenched into fists on the table. "We go to the police," she said immediately. "We tell Detective Kellogg. They'll arrest him, charge him." "With what evidence?" Marvin interrupted gently. "It's been 2 years. The car's been repaired or sold. It's his word against— Actually, we don't even have his word. We have my testimony that he drunkenly confessed to me, his Uber driver. Any decent lawyer would have that thrown out in seconds. Confession obtained during private transportation. No Miranda rights. No recording. Just the word of a grieving father desperate for closure." Diane's face crumpled. "So what? We do nothing? We let him walk around free while Jake is—" "I didn't say we do nothing," Marvin said quietly. "I said the police can't help us." She stared at him, understanding slowly dawning. "Marvin, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that Brandon Hinton destroyed our family and faced no consequences. He's been living his life, drinking, cheating on his girlfriends, sleeping peacefully in his expensive house. Meanwhile, we're losing ours. Meanwhile, our son is in a cemetery." "You want revenge," Diane said softly. "It wasn't a question. I want justice. Since the law won't provide it, we will." They sat in silence, the kitchen clock ticking away seconds that Jake would never have. Finally, Diane reached across the table and took his hand. "What do you need me to do?" The next morning, Marvin started gathering information. Brandon Hinton wasn't hard to research. He was exactly the type who lived his life online. Instagram showed a parade of restaurants, bars, gym selfies. Facebook revealed he worked at his father's commercial real estate firm, Hinton Properties. LinkedIn confirmed he was vice president of acquisitions, a title that probably meant he'd been handed a job he wasn't qualified for. But it was the deeper dive that revealed the pattern. Brandon had 2 DUIs on his record, both reduced to reckless driving through expensive lawyers. Multiple speeding tickets. A sealed juvenile record that Marvin couldn't access, but that suggested problems that started young. This wasn't a good man who'd made one terrible mistake. This was a man who believed rules didn't apply to him. His brother was Vincent Hinton, older by 5 years, married with 2 kids. The body shop in Elkton was called Precision Auto Repair, owned by a man named Carl Finch who, according to public records, had known the Hinton family for decades. Carl's son had worked for Hinton Properties before being arrested for insurance fraud 3 years ago. The pieces were forming a picture. Brandon had hit Jake, panicked, called his brother Vincent. Vincent had arranged the car swap and contacted Carl, who owed the family a favor. The BMW, because of course it was a BMW, had been repaired quickly and quietly, then likely sold out of state. A perfect conspiracy of privilege and convenience. Marvin spent 3 days surveilling Brandon's routine. The man was nothing if not predictable. Gym at 6 a.m. Office by 9 o'clock. Happy hour at O'Malley's or the Brass Rail at least 4 nights a week. Home by midnight. Usually drunk, often with a woman who wasn't his girlfriend. On the 4th day, Marvin followed Brandon to a property site in the industrial district. Brandon spent an hour there, meeting with contractors, taking photos. When he left, Marvin stayed behind and talked to the foreman, a gruff man named Reuben Bernard. "You thinking about bidding on the demolition?" Reuben asked, assuming Marvin was a potential contractor. "Maybe," Marvin lied smoothly. "What's the timeline?" "Hinton wants it fast-tracked. Old warehouse, structurally questionable. We're tearing it down in 2 weeks, putting up luxury condos. Kid acts like it's his project, but everyone knows Daddy's money is behind it. Marvin absorbed this, his engineer's mind already working. Any issues with the building? It's a death trap, Reuben said bluntly. Asbestos, weak foundations, the whole 9 yards. We're being careful with the demo, but honestly, the place could come down on its own if you sneezed wrong. An idea began forming, dark and perfect. Chapter 3. The game begins. Diane found Marvin in Jake's room on a Tuesday afternoon, his day off from driving. He'd finally entered the space, something breaking inside him as he sat on his son's bed, holding a skateboard that would never roll down a street again. "I've been thinking," she said from the doorway, "about what you said, about justice." Marvin looked up, seeing his wife clearly for the first time in months. She'd lost weight, her scrubs hanging loose, but there was steel in her spine now that hadn't been there before. "Purpose. I found something," she continued, stepping inside. "I've been going through Jake's things, and I found his journal. He kept it hidden in his closet." She handed Marvin a notebook covered in skateboard stickers. Marvin opened it with trembling hands. Jake's handwriting, messy and boyish, filled the pages with thoughts about school, friends, a girl he liked named Emma. But it was the last entry, dated the day before he died, that made Marvin's blood run cold. "Mom and Dad think I don't know about the money problems, but I hear them talking at night. I know we might lose the house. I know Dad lost his insurance. I know they're scared. I want to help, but what can a kid do? I thought about getting a job, but you have to be 16 for most places. Maybe I could do yard work or something. I don't want them to worry about me. I just want them to be happy again like before." Tears tracked down Marvin's face. Jake had known. Their sweet, thoughtful boy had carried their burden and never complained. "He was trying to protect us," Diane whispered. "Even then, and that monster took him away." Marvin closed the journal carefully. Brandon Hinton has a younger brother mentioned in his social media. Twins, actually. Teenage boys. 16 years old. Vincent Hinton's kids. Diane's eyes narrowed. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking," Marvin said slowly, "that Brandon needs to understand loss. Real loss. Not losing a girlfriend or a job, but something that matters. Someone who matters. You want to hurt his family? I want him to feel what we feel." Marvin stood, pacing the small room. "But not violence. Nothing that makes us like him. Something smarter. Something that destroys him from the inside out, the way he destroyed us." Over the next week, Marvin refined his plan. He learned that Vincent Hinton was actually a decent man, unlike his brother. Active in charity work, coached his son's baseball team, went to church every Sunday. The twins, Danny and Timothy Hinton, were good kids by all accounts. Honor roll students. Volunteers at the animal shelter. It wasn't fair, but then again, nothing about this was fair. Marvin's plan had 3 phases, each building on the last. Phase 1 started with Brandon's professional reputation. Marvin created an anonymous email account and began sending carefully documented complaints to the City Planning Commission about Hinton Properties projects. He'd done his research. Several of Brandon's developments had cut corners, bribed inspectors, used substandard materials. The paper trail existed. It just needed someone to connect the dots. Phase 2 involved Brandon's personal life. Marvin knew about Crystal, the woman Brandon was cheating with. What Brandon didn't know was that Crystal's husband, a man named Jorge Case, was a jealous type with a history of assault charges. Marvin arranged for Jorge to receive anonymous photos of his wife and Brandon together. Nothing illegal, just the truth delivered at the right moment. Phase 3 was the most dangerous and the most important. The warehouse in the industrial district was set for demolition in 10 days. Brandon would be there for the ceremony. Politicians loved ribbon-cutting photos, even when the ribbon was wrapped around condemned buildings. Marvin had studied the structural reports stolen from Hinton Properties' computer system through a remarkably simple phishing email. The building's northeast corner had hidden water damage that made it unstable. During demolition, if someone was standing in exactly the wrong place. Accidents happen on construction sites all the time. "I need you to do something for me," Marvin told Diane one night. "I need you to reach out to Jake's friend's parents. Tell them you're starting a drunk driving awareness campaign. Get their support, their testimonies about Jake. Make it public and loud. Why? Because when everything comes crashing down on Brandon Hinton, I want the world to know exactly who he is and what he did. I want his name attached to Jake's name forever. I want him to be remembered as the coward who ran. Diane nodded slowly. The detective, Kellogg. He told me once that if we ever got new evidence, he'd reopen the case. Even after all this time. We will, Marvin promised. By the time I'm done, Brandon Hinton will confess on his own. He'll beg to confess. The plan was set. The pieces were moving. And for the first time since Jake's death, Marvin Donnelly felt alive. But revenge, he was about to learn, rarely goes exactly according to plan. On a rainy Thursday night, exactly 3 weeks after Brandon Hinton had stumbled into his Uber, Marvin picked up a fare from the hospital. When he arrived, Detective Oscar Kellogg climbed into the back seat. Evening, Kellogg said, his tired eyes meeting Marvin's in the rearview mirror. Funny coincidence, isn't it? I was just thinking about you and your wife. Marvin's hands were steady on the wheel. Oh, got an interesting tip today. Anonymous. Someone saying they have information about your son's case. Kellogg leaned forward slightly. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you, Mr. Donnelly? The rain drummed on the roof. Marvin navigated through traffic, his mind racing. Because here's the thing, Kellogg continued. If someone was planning to take matters into their own hands, hypothetically speaking, I'd have to tell them that's a bad idea. A very bad idea. Revenge has a way of destroying the person seeking it just as much as the target. Hypothetically, Marvin said carefully, what if the person seeking justice, not revenge, justice, didn't care what happened to them? What if they'd already lost everything that mattered? Kellogg was quiet for a long moment. Then I'd say that person forgot something. They still have people who love them, people who need them, and throwing their life away won't bring their son back. Marvin pulled up to Kellogg's address, a modest house in a middle-class neighborhood. The detective made no move to exit. 3 years ago, I worked another case, Kellogg said quietly. Father shot the man who'd killed his daughter while driving drunk. Walked right in the guy's house and put 2 bullets in his chest. You know what happened? Marvin didn't answer. The father got 25 years. The shooter, the original drunk driver, got to die quickly. But that father? He's sitting in prison, missing his grandchildren being born, watching his wife grow old through bulletproof glass. He traded one tragedy for another. What if there was another way? Marvin asked, a way that didn't involve violence, a way that made the guilty party face consequences without destroying the person seeking justice. Kellogg studied him carefully. Then I'd say that person was smarter than most, and I'd tell them to be very, very careful. Because the line between justice and revenge is thinner than people think. Cross it, and you become what you hate. He climbed out of the car, then leaned back through the window. The anonymous tip? It mentioned a name, Brandon Hinton. Said he was bragging at O'Malley's about getting away with a hit-and-run 3 years ago. Kellogg's eyes were sharp, assessing. I'm looking into it. Officially. So if anyone was planning anything unofficial, they should probably stand down and let the law handle it. And if the law can't prove anything, Marvin challenged. Then we live with it, Kellogg said, like civilized people, or we get creative within the bounds of the law. He tapped the roof of the car. Drive safe, Mr. Donnelly. And remember, the best revenge is living well. Don't let this destroy what you have left. As Marvin drove away, his phone pinged. A text from an unknown number. The body shop owner is willing to talk. Conscience finally got to him. Meet me tomorrow. Kellogg. Marvin stared at the message, his carefully constructed plan suddenly complicated by the one thing he hadn't counted on. Actual justice through legal means might be possible after all. But the dark part of him, the part that had been planning Brandon's destruction, whispered that the law would never be enough. The law would give Brandon a plea deal, maybe a few years at most. The law wouldn't make him suffer the way Jake had suffered, the way Marvin and Diane suffered every single day. He thought about the warehouse demolition, now just 7 days away. He thought about Jorge Case, who'd received those photos yesterday and was reportedly out of his mind with rage. He thought about the Planning Commission investigation that was already beginning to unravel Brandon's business dealings. The dominoes were falling. The question was whether Marvin would let them fall all the way, or if he'd step in and stop them before someone died. As he drove through the rainy night, Marvin Donnelly realized he hadn't yet decided which kind of man he wanted to be. The one who sought justice, or the one who took it. Chapter 4. Fractures. Carl Finch's auto shop sat on the edge of Elkton like a rusted monument to better days. The sign, Precision Auto Repair, hung crooked, its neon are flickering intermittently. Marvin watched from across the street as Detective Kellogg's unmarked sedan pulled into the lot at exactly 9 a.m. Marvin had arrived an hour earlier, positioning himself in a diner parking lot with a clear view. He nursed cold coffee and watched through binoculars as Kellogg emerged from his car and disappeared into the shop's office. 20 minutes later, both men emerged, Carl looking pale and defeated, Kellogg grim but satisfied. The detective had his testimony. After 3 years, Carl's conscience had finally cracked under the weight of knowing he'd helped cover up a child's death. Or maybe it was the IRS audit that had mysteriously appeared on his doorstep last week, courtesy of an anonymous tip about unreported cash income. Marvin had learned that everyone had pressure points. You just had to find them and push. His phone buzzed. Diane. Kellogg called. He wants to meet with us this afternoon. He says he has news. Marvin's jaw tightened. This was spiraling out of his control faster than he'd anticipated. Carl's testimony would reopen the investigation, potentially lead to charges, but it wouldn't be enough. Brandon would hire expensive lawyers. They'd challenge the timeline, question Carl's credibility, point out that 3 years had erased most physical evidence. Brandon might get charged with leaving the scene of an accident, maybe vehicular manslaughter, if they were lucky. He'd plead it down to a year, maybe 2, in a minimum security facility that was more resort than prison. It wasn't enough. Not for Jake. Marvin drove to the construction site where the warehouse demolition was being prepared. Reuben Bernard was supervising a crew setting up the explosive charges that would bring the building down in a controlled implosion. Thought you decided not to bid, Reuben said when he spotted Marvin. Changed my mind. Wanted to see the operation up close. Reuben shrugged and launched into a technical explanation of how they'd calculated the precise charges needed to drop the building into its own footprint. Marvin listened intently, his engineer's mind absorbing every detail. The weak northeast corner would be the last to fall, requiring someone on site to verify clearance before detonation. Brandon Hinton insisted on being here for the demo, Reuben said with barely concealed disgust. Boss man wants his photo op. We've got a VIP viewing platform set up at the safe perimeter. Press will be there, local politicians, the whole circus. What time? Friday. Noon sharp. Going to be quite a show. For days away. That afternoon, Marvin and Diane sat across from Detective Kellogg in the same interview room where they'd given their statements 3 years ago. The room felt smaller now, more suffocating. Carl Finch has agreed to testify. Kellogg began without preamble. He stated that on the night of October 14th, Brandon Hinton contacted him in a panic. Hinton's BMW had front-end damage consistent with hitting a pedestrian. Carl repaired the vehicle over the following 3 days, was paid $5,000 in cash, and was told to keep quiet. Diane's hand found Marvin's, squeezing hard. Additionally, Kellogg continued, I obtained cell phone records showing Brandon Hinton made multiple calls to his brother Vincent immediately after the accident. Vincent Hinton has lawyered up and isn't talking, but the pattern is clear. This was a coordinated cover-up. Can you arrest him? Marvin asked. I've requested a warrant. The DA is reviewing the evidence. Given the time that's passed, it's complicated, but between Carl's testimony and the circumstantial evidence. Kellogg paused. There's a good chance we can get charges filed within the week. Leaving the scene of an accident causing death, obstruction of justice, maybe involuntary manslaughter if the DA is feeling ambitious. How long would he serve? Diane's voice was barely a whisper. Kellogg's expression darkened. With a good lawyer, he might plead down to 2 to 5 years. Could be out in 18 months with good behavior. The number hung in the air like poison. 18 months for killing their son and living free for 3 years while they'd suffered. It's not enough, Marvin said flatly. No, Kellogg agreed. It isn't, but it's what the system offers. Justice isn't always satisfying, Mr. Donnelly, but it's better than the alternative. After they left the station, Diane turned to Marvin in the parking lot. What are you going to do? What do you mean? Don't lie to me, Marvin. I know you. I know that look in your eyes. You're planning something. He met her gaze. The law is going to give Brandon Hinton a slap on the wrist. He'll do minimal time in a comfortable prison, then come out and resume his life. He'll still have his family, his money, his future. We lost everything. Jake lost everything. So what's your plan? Kill him? Become a murderer and go to prison yourself? How does that help? I'm not going to kill him, Marvin said quietly. I'm going to make him confess. Publicly. On camera. I'm going to make him admit what he did, apologize for it, and face the full weight of his guilt. Then I'm going to let the law have what's left of him. Ow! The warehouse demolition. Friday. He'll be there, surrounded by press and witnesses. I've been studying the site. There are ways to make him think he's in danger, ways to break him down psychologically until he cracks. No violence, just pressure applied at exactly the right points. Diane studied him for a long moment. This could go wrong in 100 different ways. I know. We could lose you too. I know that as well. She pulled him close, her face against his chest. Then make sure you come home. Because losing Jake broke me. Losing you would destroy me completely. Chapter 5. The Unraveling Thread. Brandon Hinton's world was crumbling, and he didn't even know it yet. Marvin watched from a distance as the first domino fell on Wednesday morning. Jorge Case confronted Brandon in the parking lot of Hinton Properties, screaming accusations while a crowd of employees watched. Security had to physically separate them before blows were exchanged. The scene was caught on multiple cell phones and was already trending on local social media by noon. By afternoon, the City Planning Commission announced a formal investigation into several Hinton Properties developments. Anonymous complaints, dozens of them, all carefully documented, had revealed a pattern of code violations, bribery, and corner-cutting that couldn't be ignored. The press was already asking questions. Brandon's father, the formidable Walter Hinton, looked furious in the photos leaving City Hall. Vincent Hinton was another matter. Marvin had initially planned to leave Jake's uncle alone. The man seemed genuinely decent, not responsible for his brother's sins. But Vincent had helped cover up the crime, had enabled Brandon's escape from justice. He deserved to understand the consequences of protecting the guilty. The twins, Danny and Timothy, were harder to justify. They were Jake's age, well, the age Jake would have been. Innocent kids who loved their father and uncle, who had no idea their family was built on a foundation of lies and cowardice. Marvin struggled with this piece of his plan. Could he really hurt innocent children to punish their father and uncle? Wasn't that exactly the kind of collateral damage that had destroyed his own family? He was pondering this moral quandary when his phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Donnelly? A woman's voice, nervous. My name is Ada Sampson. I was at the intersection that night. The night your son was hit. Marvin nearly dropped the phone. What? I saw it happen. I've been too afraid to come forward because I'm not supposed to have been there. I was running away from my ex-husband. If I testified, he would have found me. But I've been reading about the investigation reopening, and I can't stay silent anymore. I owe it to your son. What did you see? Everything. The BMW running the red light. The boy flying through the air. The driver stopping for just a second, then speeding away. I even got a partial plate number. JHN something. I wrote it down because I was shaking so badly I was afraid I'd forget. She took a shaky breath. And I can identify the driver. If you have a photo, I can tell you for certain it was him. Marvin's heart hammered. A witness. After all this time, an actual witness. Where are you? Somewhere safe. But Mr. Donnelly, I'll testify. I'll tell the police everything. Your son deserves justice, and I should have been braver 3 years ago. After Marvin gave her Detective Kellogg's contact information, he sat in his car, staring at nothing. Ada Sampson's testimony would change everything. With her identification and Carl's evidence, the case was no longer circumstantial. Brandon would go to prison for real time. The system might actually work. So why did Marvin still feel hollow? Why did the thought of Brandon simply going to prison feel insufficient? Because it wouldn't hurt him, Marvin realized. Prison would be an inconvenience, an embarrassment. But Brandon wouldn't truly suffer. He wouldn't feel the crushing weight of loss. The way every breath was agony. The way the world became gray and meaningless. Brandon needed to lose something he loved. Something irreplaceable. Marvin made a decision. That evening, he followed Vincent Hinton to the Twins baseball game. He watched from the bleachers as Danny pitched a shutout and Timothy hit a home run in the 7th inning. Vincent cheered louder than anyone, his pride obvious and genuine. After the game, Marvin approached Vincent in the parking lot. "Mr. Hinton, can I talk to you for a moment?" Vincent turned, immediately wary. "Who are you?" "Marvin Donnelly. My son was Jake Donnelly." The color drained from Vincent's face. I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. You helped your brother cover up killing my son. You knew what he did, and you helped him get away with it." Vincent looked around frantically, ensuring his sons weren't in earshot. "I didn't know at first. Not right away. Brandon called me, said he'd been in an accident, needed help. By the time I understood what really happened, it was too late. I was already involved. You could have come forward. He's my brother. My stupid, reckless, disaster of a brother, but still my brother. You have kids." He stopped, realizing what he'd said. "God, I'm sorry. I did have a kid," Marvin said coldly. "Now, I have a grave to visit and a wife who barely speaks to me because we're drowning in debt from medical bills trying to save him." Vincent's eyes glistened. "I think about your son every day. Every time I see Danny and Timothy, I think about that boy Brandon killed. If I could go back. But you can't. None of us can." Marvin stepped closer. "Here's what's going to happen. The police have witnesses now. Testimony. Evidence. Brandon is going to prison. But you're going to lose something too. What do you want from me? I want you to tell your sons the truth. I want them to know what their uncle did and what you did to cover it up. I want you to look them in the eye and confess that you're an accessory to my son's death." Vincent's face crumpled. "They're just kids. So was Jake. He was just a kid with his whole life ahead of him. Your boys get to grow up. They get to have futures. They get to have their father standing in the bleachers cheering for them. Jake doesn't get any of that because your brother was too drunk and cowardly to face consequences. Please, don't do this to them." "I'm not doing anything to them," Marvin said. "You did. When you decided protecting Brandon was more important than justice for a dead child. Now you get to live with your sons knowing what kind of man their father really is." He walked away, leaving Vincent standing alone in the parking lot, tears streaming down his face. Marvin felt nothing. No satisfaction, no guilt, just a cold, hollow emptiness where his humanity used to be. Maybe Kellogg was right. Maybe revenge was destroying him. But he'd already decided he didn't care. Chapter 6, the final setup. The warehouse demolition was set for Friday at noon. Marvin had exactly 2 days to prepare. He spent Thursday studying every detail of the site. He talked his way onto the property by posing as a freelance photographer documenting the demo for a local history blog. Elkton's industrial district was disappearing, and someone needed to record its passing. Reuben Bernard, busy with final preparations, barely paid attention to the guy with the camera. Marvin mapped out every angle, every sight line, every escape route. He located the northeast corner where the building was weakest, measured distances, calculated timing. His engineering background made it easy to understand the demolition setup. Radio-controlled charges, multiple fail-safes, strict safety perimeters. The VIP viewing platform was positioned 200 yards from the building, well outside any danger zone. Brandon would be standing there with his father, local politicians, and the press, watching the warehouse crumble into dust and rubble. A symbolic moment of progress and renewal. Marvin had other plans. He spent Thursday evening in his garage, building a device that wasn't quite a bomb, but would serve his purposes. A simple radio jammer, modified to interfere specifically with the demolition detonator's frequency. When activated at the right moment, it would prevent the charges from firing on schedule. The resulting confusion would create an opening, A small window where he could force Brandon into the building, away from witnesses, and extract his confession. "You're scaring me," Diane said from the doorway. She'd come home between shifts and found him surrounded by electronics and wiring. "I'm almost done. Marvin, please. The police have witnesses now. Ada Sampson's testimony is enough." Detective Kellogg called earlier. "They're issuing an arrest warrant for Brandon tomorrow morning, before the demolition even happens. This is over. We won." "We didn't win," Marvin said without looking up from his work. "The system is finally doing its job, but that's not the same as winning. Brandon will still get to plea bargain, will still get to minimize his punishment, will still get to tell his version of the story where he's the victim of circumstance." "So what's your plan? Kidnap him? Force him to confess? Then what? You'll have committed multiple felonies. And for what? A confession under duress isn't admissible in court." "I don't care about court," Marvin said quietly. "I care about the truth. I want the world to hear him say it, in his own words, without lawyers and PR spin. I want him to apologize to Jake. To us. I want him to hurt." Diane knelt beside him, taking the device from his hands. "And then? After you get your confession and he hurts and the world knows what he did? What happens to you? To us?" Marvin finally met her eyes. "I don't know. That's what I'm afraid of." She stood, setting the device carefully on the workbench. "I can't lose you too, Marvin. Jake is gone. If you do this and something goes wrong, if you go to prison or get hurt, or worse, then I've lost both of you, and I won't survive that." "Diane, no, listen to me." Her voice broke. "I understand why you need this. I do. Every day, I wake up, and the first thought is that Jake is gone, and the person who killed him was free. It's like acid in my chest. But the police are finally doing their job. Brandon is going to be arrested. He's going to face charges. It's not perfect, but it's something. Don't throw away your future. Our future, for revenge that won't bring Jake back." Marvin pulled her close, feeling her shake against him. "I need him to know what he took from us. I need him to feel it. He will. In prison, every day, knowing his life is over. Knowing everyone knows what he did. That's punishment, Marvin. That's justice." They stood together in the garage, surrounded by the tools of revenge, while Marvin fought a war with himself. The rational part of him knew Diane was right. Ada Sampson's testimony changed everything. Brandon would be arrested, charged, convicted. The system would work. But the broken part of him, the part that had died with Jake, wanted blood. Wanted Brandon Hinton to experience real fear, real loss, real consequences beyond the sterile justice of a courtroom. "Promise me you won't do anything stupid tomorrow," Diane whispered. "Promise me you'll just watch the demolition. Let the police arrest Brandon afterward and come home to me." Marvin held her tighter, unable to make a promise he knew he couldn't keep. Friday morning arrived gray and cold. Marvin kissed Diane goodbye, knowing she thought he was driving his usual Uber shift. Instead, he headed to the warehouse district, the jammer device hidden in his jacket. The site was crawling with activity. News crews setting up cameras. Politicians practicing their talking points. Hinton Properties executives managing logistics. And there, at the center of it all, was Brandon Hinton, wearing an expensive suit and his trademark arrogant smirk. Marvin positioned himself near the VIP platform, just another face in the crowd. He watched Brandon work the press, playing the role of the visionary businessman bringing progress to a forgotten neighborhood. No one knew that a police van was parked 3 blocks away, waiting for Detective Kellogg to give the signal to make the arrest. The plan was to let Brandon enjoy his moment, let him stand before the cameras and press, and then take him into custody in front of everyone. Public humiliation before prosecution. Kellogg had mentioned it on the phone this morning, and Marvin had heard the satisfaction in the detective's voice. Cops like theatrical arrests as much as anyone. But as Marvin watched Brandon laugh and joke with reporters, something inside him snapped. This wasn't enough. It would never be enough. He fingered the jammer in his pocket and made his decision. When the demolition countdown reached 60 seconds, Marvin activated the device. Chapter 7. The Confrontation. The countdown stopped at 45 seconds. Ruben Bernard's voice crackled over the site radio. "We've got a problem." Detonators not responding. Abort, abort. Confusion rippled through the crowd. The VIP platform went silent as officials exchanged worried glances. Brandon's smile faltered as his operations manager whispered urgently in his ear. "What do you mean abort?" Walter Hinton demanded, his voice carrying across the platform. "We have press here, cameras." "Dad, relax," Brandon said, forcing calm into his tone. "These things happen. We'll reset and try again." Marvin slipped away from the crowd, moving toward the warehouse's perimeter fence. He'd cut a section of chain link the night before, creating an entry point hidden behind a pile of construction debris. He ducked through, his heart hammering, and made his way toward the building's northeast entrance. The plan crystallized in his mind with terrible clarity. The building was still standing, but barely. The structure was compromised, unstable. If he could lure Brandon inside, away from the cameras and crowds, he could stage a confrontation, force a confession with the building's instability as leverage. Brandon would crack under pressure. Men like him always did when faced with real danger. He pulled out his phone and sent a text from a burner number he'd set up days ago. Brother Vincent is inside the warehouse. Northeast corner. He's going to tell the police everything unless you stop him. 30 yards away, he saw Brandon's phone light up. Saw him read the message, his face going pale. Saw him glance around frantically before making a decision and slipping away from the VIP platform, while everyone was distracted by the technical difficulties. Marvin watched Brandon approach the fence, find the cut section, and squeeze through. Hook, line, sinker. Marvin moved deeper into the warehouse, into the northeast corner where the structure was weakest. He could hear the building groaning around him, steel beams stressed to their limits. Dust sifted down from the ceiling with each small vibration. "Vincent!" Brandon's voice echoed through the cavernous space. "Vince, where are you?" Marvin stepped out from behind a support column. "He's not here." Brandon spun around, recognition flashing across his face. You're that Uber driver." He stopped, understanding dawning. "You're him, the father. Jake Donnelly's father," Marvin confirmed. "The boy you killed 3 years ago at Maple and 14th. Brandon's hand moved toward his pocket. Phone, probably, or maybe pepper spray. Marvin was faster, producing a small canister from his own jacket. "Don't. This building is unstable. We both know it. Your own structural reports say so. One wrong move, and we both die here. What do you want?" "The truth. On camera." Marvin pulled out his phone, setting it up on a piece of debris with the camera facing them. "You're going to confess. You're going to tell exactly what happened that night. And you're going to apologize." Brandon laughed, a desperate sound. "You're insane. Even if I confess, it won't be admissible. Confession under duress. I don't care about court. I care about the world knowing. Your family knowing. Your father out there. The one who thinks you're his golden boy. He needs to hear it from your own mouth. And if I refuse..." Marvin gestured at the groaning building around them. "Then we wait. Eventually, your operations manager will restart the countdown. The charges will blow, and we'll both be inside when it happens." Brandon's face lost all color. "You're bluffing. You wouldn't kill yourself just to." "Wouldn't I?" Marvin stepped closer. "You took my son. My marriage is barely surviving. We're losing our house. I drive strangers around at night just to pay interest on medical bills from trying to save Jake's life. What exactly do I have to live for?" The building shuddered, a deep vibration that sent more dust cascading down. A crack appeared in the wall behind Brandon, spreading like lightning across the concrete. "Jesus Christ," Brandon whispered. "Confession," Marvin repeated. "Now." Brandon stared at him, calculating. Marvin could see the gears turning, weighing options, looking for escapes. But there were none. The only exit was past Marvin, and the building was genuinely unstable. Brandon's own reports had said so. "Fine," Brandon said finally. "Fine, but then we leave." Immediately, Marvin pressed record on his phone. "Start talking." Brandon took a shaky breath. 3 years ago, on October 14th, I was driving drunk. I'd been at a party, drinking heavily. I was on my phone, arguing with my girlfriend. I was going too fast through the intersection at Maple and 14th. I ran a red light. And I hit a kid. On a skateboard. Jake Donnelly. Brandon's voice cracked. I saw him too late. I tried to brake, but couldn't stop in time. I felt the impact. I stopped just for a second, saw him lying in the street. And then I panicked. I drove away. I left him there to die. Keep going. I called my brother Vincent. He helped me hide what I did. We swapped cars, got mine fixed at a body shop owned by a family friend. I paid everyone to keep quiet. I've been living with it ever since, pretending it never happened. Look at the camera, Marvin commanded. Say his name. Apologize. Brandon faced the phone, tears streaming down his face. Jake Donnelly, I killed you. I was a coward, and I ran, and you died because of me. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. I think about you every day. I see your face. A deafening crack interrupted him. The building lurched, and part of the ceiling collapsed 20 feet away. Steel beams screamed, concrete shattered. We need to leave. Brandon screamed. Now! Marvin grabbed his phone, stopping the recording. Run! They sprinted toward the exit, the warehouse collapsing behind them in sections. Marvin's lungs burned, his legs pumped. Behind him, Brandon stumbled, fell, scrambled back to his feet. A support beam crashed down where he'd been standing seconds before. They burst through the exit just as the demolition charges suddenly activated. Someone must have bypassed the jammer, and the building imploded behind them in a thunderous roar. The shockwave threw them both to the ground, dust and debris washing over them in a choking cloud. When the dust cleared, Marvin looked up to find Detective Kellogg standing over him, gun drawn, with a dozen officers behind him. Marvin Donnelly, Kellogg said, his voice hard. You're under arrest. Chapter 8. Consequences. The holding cell was exactly what Marvin expected. Concrete, fluorescent lights, the smell of disinfectant and despair. He'd been there for 6 hours, processed and charged with reckless endangerment, kidnapping, and criminal trespass. The fact that he hadn't actually hurt Brandon didn't matter. The fact that he'd lured Brandon into a collapsing building absolutely mattered. Detective Kellogg sat across from him in the interrogation room, looking tired and disappointed. You could have died, Kellogg said. You both could have died. That building came down less than 30 seconds after you got out. If you tripped, if Brandon had been slower, if any number of things had gone differently, I'd be calling your wife right now to tell her she's a widow. I know, Marvin said quietly. Was it worth it? The confession you got is inadmissible. Any lawyer will have it thrown out as coerced. You filmed it while holding a man against his will in a structurally unsound building. That's not evidence. It's a felony. I know that too. Kellogg leaned back, studying him. So what was the point? What did you accomplish besides destroying your own life? The video's already online, Marvin said. I had it set to auto-upload if I didn't cancel the timer. By now, it's been viewed thousands of times. Maybe tens of thousands. Brandon Hinton confessing to killing my son, in his own words, with his own voice. The world knows what he did. Kellogg's jaw tightened. You realize you just gave his defense team grounds to argue he can't get a fair trial? That public prejudice is too high. You might have accidentally helped him. Marvin hadn't considered that. The realization hit him like cold water. In his quest for revenge, for public confession, he might have sabotaged the actual legal case against Brandon. However, Kellogg continued, Brandon is in the next room, and he's singing like a canary, without his lawyer present, which his father is going to be livid about. He's so shaken by what happened in that warehouse that he's confessing to everything. The hit and run, the cover-up, bribing the auto shop owner, even some of the building code violations we're investigating. He's trying to cooperate his way into a lighter sentence. What will he get? 10 to 15 years, probably. Maybe less if his lawyers are good. But Ada Sampson's testimony combined with his confession, even the coerced one, and Carl Finch's evidence, he's going to prison. Real prison, not some country club facility. Marvin closed his eyes. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. What about me? Kellogg sighed. That depends on the DEA and Brandon's father. Walter Hinton is furious, but not just at you. He's furious at Brandon for confessing, furious at Vincent for being involved in the cover-up. The family's imploding. He might push for maximum charges against you, or he might let it go to avoid more publicity. And if he pushes, 3 to 5 years, probably. You'd serve 18 months, maybe 2 years with good behavior. Marvin thought of Diane, waiting at home. Thought of Jake's empty room. Thought of the house they were losing, the life they'd already lost. Can I see my wife? She's waiting outside. But Marvin, Kellogg leaned forward. What you did was stupid and dangerous and illegal. But I understand why you did it. If someone killed my kid and got away with it, I don't know what I'd do. Maybe something worse. Is that supposed to make me feel better? No. It's supposed to help you understand that you're not a monster. You're just a father who lost everything and made some terrible choices trying to find justice. The question is what you do next. Diane looked 10 years older when she walked into the visitation room. Her eyes were red from crying, her hands shaking as she reached across the table to take his. You promised, she said, her voice breaking. You promised you wouldn't do anything stupid. I never actually promised, Marvin said softly. Don't. She pulled her hands back. Don't joke. Don't minimize this. You almost died. You could have killed Brandon Hinton. And yes, I know he deserves it. I know he killed our son, but you're not a killer, Marvin. That's not who you are. Maybe it is now. Maybe that's who I became when Jake died. No. Diane's voice was firm. You're still you. Broken, yes. Angry, absolutely. But you're still the man who spent 3 hours helping Jake build that treehouse, even though you were exhausted. You're still the man who held me every night after the accident, even though you were grieving too. You're still worth saving. Marvin felt tears prick his eyes. I don't know if I want to be saved. Well, I do. Because I love you. Because we're all that's left of our family. Because if we give up now, then Brandon really did destroy everything. She reached across again, forcing him to take her hands. The confession is everywhere. I've seen it. The whole city's seen it. Brandon Hinton's name is permanently attached to what he did. His business is done. His reputation is gone. You won. Maybe not the way you planned, but you won. It doesn't feel like winning. It's not supposed to. Winning doesn't bring Jake back. It doesn't erase 3 years of suffering. But it's something. And now you need to fight for yourself. For us, the way you fought for Jake's memory. A guard knocked on the door. Time's up. Diane stood, but didn't let go of his hands. Whatever happens next, we face it together. Do you hear me? Together. Don't give up on us. After she left, Marvin sat alone in the visitation room, staring at the concrete walls. He'd accomplished what he set out to do. Brandon had confessed. The world knew the truth. But Diane was right. It didn't feel like winning. It felt empty, hollow, like he'd traded one kind of suffering for another. The question was whether he could find a way to live with what he'd done, or if the revenge that had consumed him for 3 years had burned away everything worth living for. Chapter 9. The Road Ahead. 2 months later, Marvin stood in a courtroom wearing an ill-fitting suit Diane had borrowed from her brother. Judge Santiago Camacho presided over a packed gallery. Reporters, supporters, Brandon's family, and the face Marvin had come to dread seeing, his victim's father. Walter Hinton sat ramrod straight, his expression unreadable. Unlike Marvin, who'd lost everything, Walter still had power, money, connections. He could bury Marvin if he wanted to. But the past 2 months had revealed unexpected truths. Brandon's confession had unraveled not just his own life, but the entire Hinton Properties empire. The building code violations investigation had exploded into a full-scale scandal involving bribery, fraud, and criminal negligence. Walter Hinton, it turned out, had known about many of Brandon's shortcuts and had approved them to maximize profits. Vincent Hinton had been charged with accessory after the fact and obstruction. His sons, Danny and Timothy, had indeed learned the truth about their father and uncle. The family was shattered, just as Marvin's had been. The difference was that they deserved it. The DA, a sharp woman named Myra Leonard, had offered Marvin a plea deal. 1 year in county jail, 2 years probation, community service. She'd argued for leniency given the circumstances, citing temporary insanity caused by grief. Brandon's lawyers had pushed for maximum sentencing, but their position was weak. Their client had confessed on camera, and public opinion was overwhelmingly sympathetic to Marvin. Mr. Donnelly, Judge Camacho said, his voice measured, what you did was dangerous and illegal. You had no right to take the law into your own hands, regardless of your personal tragedy. The court system exists specifically to prevent vigilante justice. Marvin stood, accepting the rebuke. However, the judge continued, the court recognizes the extraordinary circumstances of your case. You discover that the man who killed your son and destroyed your family had faced no consequences for 3 years. The system failed you. While that doesn't excuse your actions, it provides context. The judge shuffled papers on his bench. I'm accepting the plea agreement with one modification. 6 months in county jail, credit for time served. 2 years probation. 500 hours of community service, to be completed with a drunk driving awareness program. You'll speak to young people about the consequences of DUI, using your son's story and your own mistakes as teaching tools. Marvin's knees nearly buckled with relief. 6 months. He could survive 6 months. Mr. Donnelly, the judge said, catching his eye, I hope you use your time in custody to reflect on who you want to be going forward. You've suffered unimaginable loss, but you still have a life to live. A wife who loves you. A community that's rallied around you. Don't throw that away on bitterness and revenge. Yes, Your Honor. As Marvin was led away, he caught Diane's eyes in the gallery. She was crying, but she also smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her in 3 years. Brandon Hinton's trial was a media circus. With his confession public and multiple witnesses corroborating the evidence, his lawyers negotiated a plea deal, 15 years for vehicular manslaughter, leaving the scene of an accident and obstruction of justice. He'd serve at least 12 before possibility of parole. Walter Hinton and Hinton Properties faced separate criminal and civil charges that would take years to resolve. The company was likely finished, its reputation destroyed. Walter would probably avoid prison, but his empire and legacy were ash. Vincent Hinton received 5 years probation and a suspended sentence in exchange for full cooperation with prosecutors. His marriage survived, barely, and he was working to rebuild trust with his sons. He'd also reached out to Marvin through lawyers, offering to pay restitution, not to buy forgiveness, but because it was the right thing to do. Marvin accepted the money. It paid off Jake's medical debt and saved their house from foreclosure. It didn't bring Jake back, but it gave him and Diane the chance to breathe again. County jail was exactly as miserable as Marvin expected. He spent his days reading, working in the library, avoiding trouble. He wrote letters to Diane every night, trying to put into words everything he'd felt but couldn't say for 3 years. She wrote back, telling him about her days, about the support groups she'd joined, about slowly learning to live with the hole in their lives where Jake used to be. Other inmates gave him respect. Word got around about why he was there, not from Marvin, but from news reports. Fathers and mothers understood. More than a few told him they'd have done the same or worse. 5 months into his sentence, Marvin received an unexpected visitor, Detective Oscar Kellogg. Thought you should know, Kellogg said, sitting across from him in the visitation room. Brandon Hinton was attacked in prison last week. Broken jaw, 3 broken ribs, internal bleeding. He'll survive, but barely. Marvin felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not guilt, nothing. Who did it? Guy whose daughter was killed by a drunk driver. He saw Brandon's confession video, recognized him in the yard. Guards broke it up before it got worse. Kellogg leaned back. Brandon's being transferred to protective custody. He'll spend the rest of his sentence isolated, alone. Seems fitting. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to understand something. The revenge you took, the confession, the public humiliation, that was bad enough for Brandon. He was already going to spend the next 12 years in a cage. You didn't need to do what you did at the warehouse. The system was working, slowly, imperfectly, but working. I know that now. Do you? Because I've seen guys like you. They get so consumed by revenge that even when they get it, it's not enough. They can't let go. They can't move forward. And they waste whatever life they have left. Kellogg met his eyes. Don't be that guy, Marvin. You've got a wife waiting for you. You've got a community that wants to see you succeed. You got a chance to turn Jake's death into something meaningful by teaching kids not to drink and drive. Don't waste it by staying stuck in the past. After Kellogg left, Marvin sat in his cell and thought about the man he'd been before Jake died. Happy, successful, focused on building a future. That man was gone, killed in the same accident that killed his son. But maybe he could become someone new. Someone who carried Jake's memory forward, not through revenge, but through preventing other families from suffering the same loss. Someone who turned tragedy into purpose. It wouldn't bring Jake back. It wouldn't heal the wounds completely. But maybe it would be enough to make the remaining years worth living. 6 months later, Marvin stood in front of a high school auditorium filled with teenagers who looked impossibly young, younger than Jake would have been. They slouched in their seats, half paying attention, probably assuming this was just another boring assembly. On the screen behind him was Jake's picture, 13 years old, grinning, holding his skateboard. Next to it was a photo of the intersection at Maple and 14th. Then the mangled skateboard recovered from the scene. Then Brandon Hinton's mugshot. 3 years ago, Marvin began, his voice steady. My son Jake left our house to meet his friends. He was following every safety rule, crossing at the light, staying in the crosswalk. He did everything right. But none of that mattered, because the man driving toward him had made different choices. Choices that ended my son's life and destroyed my family. The kids in the front row sat up straighter, paying attention now. I'm not here to tell you don't drink, Marvin continued. That's not realistic. I'm here to tell you that if you do drink, don't drive. And if you see your friends drinking and getting behind the wheel, stop them. Because the consequences aren't abstract statistics or dramatic scenarios in a PSA. The consequences are real families, real kids, real lives ended in seconds. He talked for 30 minutes. Told Jake's story. Told his own story, including the parts where he'd made terrible choices out of grief and rage. Showed them what revenge looked like, how it consumed him, nearly destroyed him. When he finished, a girl in the third row raised her hand. Do you forgive him? The driver? Marvin considered the question. No, he said honestly. I probably never will. Brandon Hinton took something from me that can't be replaced. But I'm learning to live with it. To move forward despite it. Because staying frozen in anger and grief doesn't honor Jake's memory. Living well, trying to prevent other families from suffering the same loss, that honors him. After the assembly, several students came up to thank him. A boy with red-rimmed eyes confessed he'd been drinking and driving regularly. I'm going to stop, he said. I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to destroy someone's family. Good, Marvin said. That's all I'm asking. Diane was waiting for him in the parking lot. She'd taken the afternoon off to hear him speak for the first time. How was I? He asked as they drove away. Honest, raw, powerful. She reached over and took his hand. Jake will be proud of you. I'm proud of you. They drove in comfortable silence for a while. Then Diane spoke again. I've been thinking about the memorial fund at Jake's school. We could expand it. Create scholarships for students who want to study engineering like you or nursing like me. Keep his name alive in a positive way. I'd like that. And she hesitated. I think we should try to have another child. Marvin's hands tightened on the wheel. Diane, not to replace Jake, never to replace him, but to keep living, to build a future instead of just mourning the past. We're still young enough. We still have love to give. She squeezed his hand. Jake would want us to be happy.